Everybody, this is Lex Kelly. Welcome to the Atlanta Black Expo. I am here with the Honorable, my Baba, one of my guides, one of my mentors is Kazemde Ajamu. How you doing, brother?
I am wonderful, brother. How you?
I'm doing great. And I'll tell you, man, whenever we had the opportunity to address this stage, when Rick called me and said, you know what, we have the opportunity to address this stage, you were the very first person I thought of. And the reason why you were the very first person I thought of is because through all the years of knowing you, you are the person that has kept me politically balanced and sound. So when it came down to having a place that I can go to get some political knowledge or wherewithal, I always felt comfortable because I had somebody in the community that I could go to that would help give me perspective and guidance, while at the same time not trying to move my personal biases or what I might personally feel, but you were able to give me some clarity. So you were the very first person that I called because being part of the community and building the community and being part of organizations, you know, we've been in the ground, you know, pounding that pavement. I thought this would be a befitting conversation to have at the Atlanta Black Expo, dealing with so many Black businesses and organizations and SMBs. And I know for a fact that as a community, we struggle a lot with understanding how politics, legislation, and how that affects us on a community level.
Yes.
So one thing that you say that really, it got me thinking a lot is you say that politics is a management system for our communities.
Yes.
Do I got that right?
Yes. And I put emphasis on our.
On our community.
Yes.
Can you go a little bit more? First of all, let's do this. Before we get into that, tell us a little bit about yourself. Just give us a little bit, 30 seconds about who you are. I know who you are, you know, so give us a little bit about who you are as a person.
Well, Kazemde Ajamu, husband, father, grandfather, great-grandfather. Let's start there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I am the owner of Black Culture Center and Bookstore.
Make sure y'all check it out, downtown Lithonia.
Downtown Lithonia.
Yes, sir. Shout out to the block.
I am also the founder of Black Culture Center and Leadership Academy.
Yes, sir.
I have a podcast, The Urban Politician.
Yes, sir.
I am the vice chair of Lithonia Housing Authority. So I wear multiple hats. But most importantly, I'm a community person. I'm a servant to the community.
Yes,
so
sir.
It starts there.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that. So let's jump back on board. Number one, thank you for your service. I've personally been able to reap benefit of it and witness it, and thank you. You matter. Like, you matter so much. Talk to us about, you know, politics being the management system for our community.
Well, essentially, we understand law, policy, but we don't look at politics as a management system, how we look at it, the flow of money, how the money flows from the federal government to the state government to the local government, and what we'll say compliance, but I like to use the word conditions are attached to that money, right? And how that impacts the policy. So, for example, little known fact, in 1994, the state of Florida passed the most comprehensive African/African-American history curriculum in the state. Most of us don't know that. However, that program or that law was never properly funded.
Okay.
So really didn't go anywhere, essentially, right? It was there, it existed, but there was no funding. So how did the community, what was the community impact? Very little. Right. So we're not tracking the flow of money. There are billions of dollars annually that come into our community.
Yes.
Where is it? Who is deciding? Right. So depending on whether you're left or right in your politics, that money flows from the federal government into the state, locally, and that money is dished out to whom? And how are we holding them accountable? So therefore, we sit back and we look back and we say our communities aren't changing.
Okay.
Because those dollars aren't being properly accounted for and distributed.
So that puts me in the mind frame. If I look at like how water flows, how electricity flows, you have your main source. And then from that main source, it's distributed out into different spaces.
Absolutely.
being that it's distributed out into different spaces, if I'm troubleshooting, if I'm an electrician or if I'm a plumber, and I know that there's water coming from the street, or I know that there's electric coming from the street, but yet it's not getting to an outlet in the house, in a specific room, it's now for me to have certain checkpoints because I understand how it flows. If I'm hearing you correctly, if I understand how it flows, I know to go to certain checkpoints to see where electricity or water is flowing and where it's not, and then narrowing down to where that disconnect is. And if I hear you correctly, being an entrepreneur and being, a head of organization, and I'm looking for funding, and I'm looking for how I'm going to create a real impact in the community and how we're going to be able to do that. And if I'm looking to make sure that my federal, state, and local governments are participating in that, because obviously they're taxing us and they're absorbing money and it's not getting to us, I need to know where I can go to check that. So is that an educational issue? Like what do I do as a small business? Like, what do I need to do to kind of get back on track?
That is exactly an education issue.
Okay.
We don't, to begin with, they don't even teach civics.
Okay.
But even when they did teach civics, they're not teaching civics at that granular level.
Okay.
So unless you're in it. So for example, a city passes, they have some construction efforts and they want minority participation, right? So minorities come and they want to fill out these applications, but there's a condition attached to that. You got to have insurance.
Right.
And the cost of insurance can be exorbitant.
Right.
So that takes you out, right? Or there's not enough communication issues where people actually know what's going on. Or a better example with the COVID money for businesses.
Okay.
If you didn't file taxes, you didn't get money. How many businesses are operating in that space? So there's always compliance or condition issues. So it's an education process. To use your example, you have to be educated on where the clouds, how the water flows.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And you have to do the research, right? So you know where that clog is. And you can't address that or solve that until you understand what it is. So it really begins from an education. And that's why we have to flip how we look at politics. So when I say politics is the management system of our economy, it's a system.
Okay.
Right? We can control or manage that system much properly, but we have to educate our people. We have to make it sexy. We have to understand this is why our school systems aren't getting better. Right? This is why our streets and conditions are policing. Right? These are all dollars that's coming from the federal and state level. How are they being spent? And by whom are they being spent? And this is where, as individuals and as a collective, if we are educated in these things, then we are voting and holding accountable the people that have our best interests. But as of now, we're just voting on issues. Right. We're not voting on or understanding how that money is flowing, how it's going to impact me directly. We assume you pass affirmative action, for instance, or a DEI law, for instance, right? We assume that that's going to affect us when it absolutely doesn't. So, and that's because we're not tracking who that money is being given to and how they're spending it and what their intentions are with that money.
Right. And we're not educating people within our community, especially in civics, but in many other areas like law and finance, and making sure that we support them and put them in places so that way they can be an effective change in those positions. Yeah. So that way they are our city council and our mayors and they're our state reps, and they come from our neighborhoods and they're educated about our neighborhoods and they're educated about the management system, and they're able to kind of provide some clarity and then be a clarity and a bullhorn to us, because everybody is not going to want to go learn all this stuff. We got to have somebody that's our trusted source, right? Kind of like yourself.
Well, I believe that everybody is a stakeholder.
Okay.
Right now, stakeholders could be different things. So I'm reminded of public housing right here in Atlanta, not too far from here, where they were going to tear those down and build new housing. But some of the residents lobbied and had a seat at the table.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying? To decide what is that going to look like and how are we going to protect the people that should continue in housing, that have a place to live once they rebuild. So we all have a place. We all have if you're in media, right? there's politics in media. There's money that flows in that. So wherever you are in your space, that's what you should be advocating for. And sometimes it's as simple as going to a city council meeting, going to a school board meeting, because you really have no idea. Cities get blocks of money, and oftentimes if they are spending it, they're not spending it with our voices in mind.
Absolutely.
We experience that every day.
Every day.
Right? They find some other reason to spend that money that they think doesn't effectively serve our community. But if we're not there,
right,
if we're not showing up, can everyone show up at a city council meeting? No.
But we don't need everybody.
But what we do need is, if we have forums such as this and other forums, you show up.
Okay.
Right?
Show up like you did.
Show up. Exactly.
Okay. So let's backtrack slightly. We're talking about the money that is allocated from the federal level for specific things and how it's not getting to us. A hot topic since Trump was elected is him cutting out DEI. What are your concerns about the effectiveness of diversity, equity, and inclusion and initiatives and benefiting the Black community? Because that seems to be, Black folk was up in a roar over this. Were we even the ones that benefited from that the most? What are your thoughts on that?
I think conceptually DEI, the intention of it was good, but what you had was the emergence of several movements, whether it's civil rights, whether it's critical race theory that falls underneath that, whether it's women issues, whether it's issues for the disabled, veteran issues. So you lumped all of these issues under one banner. Right. Which first and foremost made it an easy target.
Yes.
So anyone that doesn't like a specific thing about that would tear the whole thing down. But more importantly, it gets watered down. Right. So if you're dealing with women issues, so that could be Black women and issues, right? But civil rights gets watered down. So how are they speaking to Black men? So it seems like it's inclusive, but it's not, because if you look at the last 4 years, the discussion has been whatever Trump was doing or women's right to choose, right? Those were the loudest voices. So the voices that weren't being spoke to under this DEI banner felt like they didn't have a seat at the table. I never thought that we should merge all of them together, or even if we do, civil rights should be at the core. As a Black community, civil rights should be at the core. That's what we should be advocating for. The squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Absolutely.
Right? But civil rights got watered down. It's kind of more difficult to advocate for one thing when you're talking about a whole.
Right. So
what gets the loudest voices, right?
So you're definitely not game for lumping things together. It needs to be specifics within the funding, so that way it has like a laser effect on specific communities that have conditions that are special and need to be taken care of on its own.
Even if DEI exists as we know it, or continues to exist as we know it, as a Black community, the civil rights aspect of that should be the most important issue.
Okay.
And not just during election cycles or with election leaders. That's what we should be advocating for consistently, is that should be first and foremost in our agenda and how that affects us, right?
But our lack of education could possibly have been the reason why it got hijacked. Maybe.
I think that's part and parcel.
Okay.
I think that by and large that the media dictate what's important in any election cycle.
Okay.
And with fears, not that I'm a pro-Trump person or even voted for Trump, right? But the fear. Right. So are we voting against our fears, or are we voting for what's best for us?
Understood.
Be clear, I'm not stating that he is best for us. What I'm stating is the ideal is who is going to better serve the Black community, and what are we getting out of it? If you're asking for our vote, what tangible evidence? What do you do? What are you going to do differently than previous administrations?
Understood. So we went over quite a bit. This is definitely not going to be the last time that we dig into this topic. We're definitely going to have you by Rolling Out Studios. We're going to speak more on this. We went over a couple of things. We went into how the money flows from the federal down to the bottom, how it affects the community. You being a leader in the community and having and starting this nonprofit, this organization called the Black Dot Leadership Academy. Can you give me a quick breakdown of what your endeavors are within that space?
That is really to educate, train, and raise up social and civic leaders under the guise of this system, this management system, how we properly train up our people, particularly young people, into understanding it's not just about issues and social issues, it's about the flow of money.
Yes.
Right. And how we utilize that flow of money, not just to create other business opportunities, but to build institutions. Quite frankly, we haven't built institutions since the 1920s and 30s.
Wow.
Right. So how do we effectively use the Jewish community as an example? Some of them may send their children to public school system. However, they have cultural centers or synagogues in which they're deeply rooted in cultural politics and things of that, right? So they're not turning their children over solely, right?
Sure.
So those are institutions that should be, the church used to operate as that in the Black community.
Right.
But we need to build these institutions that everyone can participate in these type of things.
Okay. All right, so thank you for that. So in a nutshell, we need to reestablish a kinetic chain of information and knowledge that flows from one generation to the next, that is seeped in truth, civility, humanitarianism, and on top of that, culture.
And everybody needs to have a seat at the table. We need to listen to all voices, pro and con. Right?
Absolutely. Balance.
Clarity is more important than agreement.
Clarity
is more important than agreement.
I'll say to that. Now, last question going out. How are you implementing AI into your daily workflow?
Well, thanks to you and Mr. Mathis over there, I have learned how to use AI, specifically ChatGPT, right, to think like me. I think that's the way I want to put it is before it was spitting out things that didn't sound like me, that into my concerns. So how to use the prompts, right? It's becoming more efficient. It helps me. Oftentimes I want to write. It takes me a couple hours to figure out how I want to write it. Right. Now I can go in and I can write it out in my broken up ways, and it helps put it together.
Absolutely.
What you sent me today.
Yes.
That note. What is that?
Notebook LM.
I'm listening to it. I'm like, wait a minute. That's exactly what I said.
Right.
You just recorded that, and I assume you put that in there, but it captured the essence and didn't deviate from one piece of what I said. So AI is something that I'm implementing. It's kind of funny. One last story is that I was on a panel at American Booksellers Association last year, and they asked me about technology, right? And I said, around my peers, I'm technologically savvy. Around you guys, I'm like technologically backwards, right? But it's because of listening and not being afraid of it.
Yes.
Right? You find ways to use it to best serve what you need. So
much like politics.
Man,
absolutely. Brother, I appreciate you. Thank you for stopping by.
Thank you
very much. And we'll speak to you soon.
All right.
All right, everybody. Listen, that wraps up our interview. Kazemde, where do we find you? Where can people find you at? How do we get in contact with you?
Well, Black Dot Cultural Center, the bookstore, and the Leadership Academy are at 6984 Main Street in Lithonia, Georgia. My Instagram is black.cc. My Facebook is Kazemde Ajamu is my personal, but there's a Black Dot Culture Center and Bookstore Facebook page. Don't ask me what the other ones are, but I do have presence on TikTok, Facebook. What am I missing? Instagram.
Okay.
My website.
Yes, definitely website.
How could we forget that? Website address is blackdotcc.com. blackdotcc.com. I am a bookstore. So what I really like my listeners to know is just because we don't have it on the shelves, you don't have to go to Amazon. You can go on my website, search any book, any title, author's name. It will pop up. Order it and ship it.
And you will be supporting Black business.
Black businesses. There you go.
I say. Well, thank you, brother. Thank you for coming again.
Thank you.
All right, that's our time. We out.